welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 25, where we're talking about a little card game about dying horribly in the rainforest, The Lost Expedition. But before we get to that, let's start as we always do with the news. Our first bit of news this week is that Shady Torby, the creator of Onirim and Sylveon and the other games in the Oniverse series, popular series of solo games, has announced a new title. It's called Arion, coming again from Z-Man Games and coming out sometime in spring 2019. This is going to be a game where you play an inventor of flying machines that are being used by the dreams in the Oniverse world to traverse the skies of the Oniverse, using dice to build new ships. I had to write all that down before we recorded this episode because I understand so very little of what it means.
Well, that seems perfectly intuitive to me.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't dreams need ships to fly around their own world? I've played Onirim before, and it's a good game. I really enjoy it. It's a classic. I prefer the app, honestly, because there's a lot of shuffling involved in that game. And so I am interested in trying this out. And I'm sure a lot of you will be too. So we just want to let you know that new game is coming out sometime in the first quarter of 2019, and it's called Arion from Z-Man Games. Our second bit of news this week is kind of an odd title. Renegade Games, which is a pretty big publisher now that they've made Clank and several other big titles, they have announced a solo series of games from Kane Klinko, the guy who designed Fuse and Flatline. So this is called the Solo Hero series, and it starts with a game called Proving Grounds. And what makes this a little bit odd is this game is a real-time dice placement game where you play a female warrior who's fighting in some kind of coliseum, and yet it's a story-driven game. So there's a novella that comes in the box that you read that maybe starts you off on the story, and then future installments are going to finish it out. And it just seems very interesting and different to me.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Do you have any idea how long the novella is? Like, do they say?
I feel like they said 50-ish pages, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, that's pretty long for a board game companion.
Yeah, it is.
I'm not sure how many people would actually be into that, but I think it's an interesting idea, and it sounds like there's going to be some kind of companion app, and like it will probably be a little less frantic than Fuse, or at least I'm assuming it will, because the playtime is listed as like 45 minutes in length. So you can't have people just rushing like Escape the Curse of the Temple speed for 30 minutes flat out.
Right. I mean, will the timer be going literally the entire time, or is there any start or stop? Or is it just like a solid, this will be a 45-minute game?
I'm wondering if it will be like maybe 3 10-minute rounds or something with a little bit of upkeep in between. Right. That seems more manageable to me.
Yeah.
There's a game that came out from Level 99 Games a couple of years ago called Millennium Blades, which is a game about playing a collectible card game. They released a solo expansion for that, and they had sort of a similar structure where you play in 10-minute rounds where you play real time, but it's a little bit more relaxed, I guess, because you're not trying to escape a crumbling temple or something. I'm wondering if that's what this is.
Yeah.
So having it in those 10-minute chunks would make it more manageable for sure. Anyway, I think this is pretty interesting to see such a big company embracing solo gaming at this kind of level, and I'm interested to see where this goes. So that is the Solo Hero series first entry, Proving Grounds from Renegade Games, which is coming out in April of this year. Our third game that we're going to mention this week, and our final game, is Gardens of Babylon. This is a game coming to Kickstarter from designer Stavros Polivu? I don't know. It's a hard to pronounce name, and I'm sorry, Stavros, that I messed it up, but this is coming from Cackleberry Games. This is a tile placement game about planting seeds in the Gardens of Babylon and trying to create combos where your seeds will cascade down waterfalls to other tiles. It looks pretty interesting. It has kind of a weird, trippy, isometric art style that gives it a strange 3D effect when it's laid out on the table. What's interesting to me, for our sake, though, is that this comes with solo rules in the box, and I got a chance to take a look at them. This is a 60-minute, medium weight Euro game that only has 4 pages of rules and like a paragraph of rules for the solo play with sort of a simple Automa variant. So that's pretty cool. That is sort of my wheelhouse in terms of games of that weight to rules ratio. I really like that. So if you're looking for a simple combo-tastic kind of Euro game that you can play solo game, check out Gardens of Babylon, which is on Kickstarter right now. And that's all the news we've got for this week. So we're just going to dive right into the review like we normally do for The Lost Expedition and its expansion, The Fountain of Youth and Other Adventures. This is a game from Pierre Sylvester and published by Osprey Games in 2017. It plays 1 to 5 players. And The Lost Expedition is a game that's gained a lot of attention among solo gamers since it came out, where you play a team of explorers going out into the Amazon in search of the lost city of El Dorado. So by using your expertise and making the best of your food and your ammunition and your health, you're going to attempt to overcome a wide variety of hazards and obstacles. And if you're quick-witted and more than a little bit lucky, you're going to make it to the city with your life. You probably won't. You're probably going to die. But if even one member of your team is able to reach the lost city, then you win the game. That's the idea of what we're trying to do here. So we're just going to dive into this the same way we always do by starting with the components.
Yeah, I really love the components of this game. The art is, I don't know, it's just so perfect. Like the style of the art, execution, everything about the art, I absolutely love. And what's best about the art is that it's on these large format cards, so you really get to see it. It's great.
Yeah, I agree. The artwork is reminiscent, a lot of people have said, of Tintin, which I'm not that familiar with, but I've seen pictures of it. It's a really beautiful, vibrant color palette that they use here, which makes sense for a game set in the rainforest anyway. But yeah, I agree. Those oversized cards really show it off. And not just like individual character cards or events, but even as you're playing this game, there's this panorama of cards that's laid out in front of you that form, one big solid picture. And that's the land that you're traversing during the game. I think it's cool that they decided to do that so that it actually looks like a landscape.
Yeah, it was a great touch.
Now, one thing that we should say here is those large cards do mean it takes up more table space than you're probably expecting for a card game.
Right. Whenever I saw the size of the box and just knowing that it's a card game, I wasn't expecting it to take up quite as much space as it did. It's not a problem, but it just took up way more than I realized.
Yeah, it's still like a really small, compact box for traveling, take it on the road and that sort of thing. But if you were setting it out somewhere, you would definitely want to be able to spread out a little bit. One other thing I would say is beyond the cards in this game for characters and events and the landscape you're traveling, there are just a few tokens. And they're fine. They're very clear. I feel like the graphic design in this is very easily understood, and all of that's handled super well. And even, I know this is a silly thing, but I thought even the presentation of the box was kind of nice because it sort of opens like a book. Yeah. And it has a very simple insert that actually works at holding everything in it. I mean, it's a little bit loosely and things kind of slide around a bit. Right. But it's just rare these days that a game comes with an insert that I'm going to keep.
Yep.
So it's very nice presentation for the game, and I would say that extends to the rule book as well. The rules are very simple for this game. It's a very short, compact rule book, and I don't know, I didn't have any trouble digesting these and getting right to it.
No, yeah, they're fine. I think for me personally, I like to kind of see what the game flow is first and then explain more of the detailed rules. And since this game can kind of be a little abstract, getting the information up front about different icons and stuff wasn't particularly useful, but I mean, it's a short rule book. It doesn't really matter what order it comes in.
Yeah, that's true. It is ordered in kind of a strange way, but I still didn't have too much trouble grasping the main ideas. Yeah. By the end, everything comes together.
Oh yeah, they're written well. It's clear. It's concise.
Yeah.
They did a good job with it.
And there are good solo rules that don't seem to deviate much from the main flow of the game. The solo rules for this are pretty short, and they make sense with everything else that you heard before. The only thing that I would say here is the same thing that we've said before, and I'm going to say over and over again until publishers stop doing it. Stop putting the rules for the solo mode in like 2 or 3 different places. I don't care if it makes the rulebook longer. Put everything I need to know for setting up the solo game in one place. They do split the rules for solo play in this rulebook into the main sort of idea section for the game, the cooperative section for the game, and then again in the solo rules. And so having to flip to 3 different places in the rulebook, I don't like that. It's not something that's easy to remember setup wise. I mean, I still have to refer back to it even after playing several games, and so I feel others probably will too. It's just a minor thing, but a thing that I'm going to keep saying until it changes. I don't really like that part of it. But otherwise, the rules are great, and the play for the game, as far as the rule set is concerned, is very simple. And that makes this, in some ways, kind of a lighter, easy-to-play card game. But it's not easy.
No, it is brutally hard.
Yeah, this might be the hardest cooperative game I've played in ages. Yeah, brutally, brutally difficult. In fact, when I played just the base game, which is what we'll start with here since we're going to cover that and the expansion, I was unable to beat the base game. I've seen other people say that the expansion is what makes this game winnable. You can adjust the difficulty a little bit by removing cards from the path, but overall, I didn't make it far enough down the path most times for that to make a difference.
Yeah, and I'm sure that obviously with time and experience, this would be different, but the first 3 games I played, I don't think I made it to the end of the second day.
Oh, yeah. So there's sort of an interesting thing that happens in this game where every day you have a morning hike and an evening hike where you're going to put down this row of hazards in front of you that you have to overcome to survive the day. And as you take part in those hazards, they're going to deplete your health or your ammunition, or they're going to take away some of your expertise, because just like in real life, you might have expertise in a thing, but the more you use your expertise, the less you have remaining. So
of yourself, your soul.
Yeah.
It's slowly just eroding, evaporating off into the blackness of the universe.
That's how I like to think about this. That part doesn't make a whole lot of thematic sense to me, but yeah, I tend to think of it as just soul-killing work getting through the jungle. But you end up spending these resources that you start the game with, like a substantial pool of health and food and ammunition.
Substantial?
Okay. It feels substantial compared to the end of the game.
Sure.
Yeah. So you start the game with some meager amount of hobo pack of food and supplies slung over your shoulder as you go into the woods. And you're going to encounter these series of hazards, and some of the hazards will give you a chance to progress along the main path for the game. So if you're picturing this, there are 2 separate tracks of cards, one with a bunch of obstacles you've got to overcome, and one with the 9 cards you've got to progress through to get to El Dorado. And when you're encountering the hazards, you kind of think to yourself, I just need to overcome this. I just need to get to the end of this, or I need to get more supplies. But the trick is, if you're not also paying attention to going down the main path, which will actually win you the game, you're just cycling through days for nothing. And some of the cards that are out there that you encounter during the day are actually pretty good for you. I mean, not many of them.
Right.
But there are a couple.
There are a couple that are good, but sometimes you don't draw those cards at all, and it feels bad.
Yeah, it feels real bad. My first game, I felt like I was off to a really strong start, and I had, I found a couple of cards like an abandoned camp where I could find some extra food to get me going, or things that didn't actually hurt me, but just gave me more supplies. And I was feeling pretty good about myself, thinking, I've got plenty of health or food so I can spend when some obstacle comes up, like suddenly I'm faced with a Amazonian tribe that wants to kill me. I can spend food to, I guess, throw them a chicken leg or something so that I can run past them in the woods.
Right.
Or however that works thematically.
Or, you encounter a jaguar, crocodile, and, killer jungle ants. Back to back.
Right, yeah. Suddenly you get all of those things, and then that wealth that you thought you had is gone almost instantly. And that's sort of the core puzzle of the game. If you come to this game thinking about your experience as a character in the way you do in other games, where you think, I'm going to get stronger, I'm going to level up over the course of this game so that I can slowly begin to deal better and better with the obstacles around me, you're going to be disappointed. This is a game of depleting your resources well. If you want to survive, you've got to slowly let your health deplete and your food in a way that leaves one of you still alive for the lost city. Which means that not only do you want to deplete things well, you also have to get into the mindset of, like, I'm gonna lose people to this. In fact, thematically, you might just sacrifice people so that you can progress. Which doesn't feel that great, morally.
Right.
But it's a survival game, and you might be fooled into thinking from the artwork that it's a relatively kind of casual one, but it will brutally beat you. So based on all of that, you might be thinking, what is actually fun about this game? Because wandering into the woods only to get beaten down by perhaps a bad draw where you get killed by some killer ants or an Amazonian tribe isn't actually fun, right? It might be exciting in the same way that, for instance, Eldritch Horror is exciting when you encounter so much luck that it creates moments of drama, which I think this does. But unless you also have agency, then games like this aren't actually fun at the end of the day. What's remarkable about this game to me is that it manages to blend both of those really well. So yes, you can have a really bad draw and you can get beaten down by events that you can't avoid. But the other side of this game is you have opportunities to control what orders you tackle the hazards in, and even sometimes whether you want to tackle a hazard or not.
Yeah, that's one of the most compelling things about this game to me is just how the two stages of every day of the morning hike and evening hike, and how you're able to manipulate and interact this row of obstacles that you're going to encounter. In the morning, the cards will order themselves, and so you don't quite have as much power, but you will get to choose which cards you're getting rid of in the morning, and then in the end, where you have more control over this row of cards, is based on which cards you have left in your hand. And just, I don't know, the drawing of the cards from the deck, the unknowing of that, I don't know, it's just very, very interesting.
Yeah, so when you start the hike, you have a hand of 6 cards for the day. And they're all bad things in your hand. But what is interesting to me, like you said, in the morning, you have to order them in a specific way. There are numbers at the bottom of the card. So you lay down a card, and then in the morning, you have to put it in the path in numerical order. So you're rearranging cards and making sure they progress from least to greatest. And so you know the rules, and you can say, okay, I want to play a low-numbered card here or a high-numbered card here to make sure it ends up, I think, at this place in the path. But you still don't know everything because you only get to put down 3 cards from your hand, and then you draw 3 cards from the top of the deck.
And there's some back and forth of when you're playing cards and when you're drawing them from the deck.
Yes. Yeah. So it's not all just in one go, right? You 2 cards at the beginning, I think, and 1 card at the end or something like that. I like that because there's some good tactics thinking that goes into, okay, I want to put this card down here, I think. I think now's the right time to play it. But it's also kind of a press your luck game in that way, because you're assuming, okay, if I put down this 35 card here, the next card that's coming up is a 50. I really don't want to deal with that right after the 35. So surely there will be another card that comes off the deck that goes in between them, right? That's good to me. I like that kind of thinking. And it's also just something that's unusual for these kind of games. I don't feel like I think that much about the position of a card in a row. I don't think of that as a meaningful decision most of the time.
Right.
But in this game, it's like life or death.
Yes. And your ability, because there's some things that allow you to skip cards or rearrange cards once you actually have all the cards down. And yeah, so there's a push your luck is like, well, I think I can switch these things around to where it'll be okay. But then something happens where it's like, oh no, everything's done now. I'm just going to get eaten by a giant anaconda.
Yeah, and sometimes it does happen that way, but other times I felt like, okay, if I put this down here, I can swap these 2 cards, and then this one on the end, that's really bad for me, I can just make drop off completely, and I don't even have to deal with it. And sometimes you can chain those abilities in a way that makes you feel like kind of a genius.
Right.
That's really satisfying.
Because I definitely feel better about dealing with vampire bats instead of scorpions.
Yes, yeah, it's definitely a choice between bad things at almost every turn. But if it's a bad thing that maybe depletes one resource that you have a lot of and gives you one that you're short on, you know, enough that you can make it through another obstacle at the end, that's pretty cool. And then you're also in that path going to be faced with the choice of like, okay, I can get more supplies here that are going to help me later on to endure more obstacles, or I can spend one that lets me move down the path. You've got to 9 times during this game start working your way down the path toward the city, because that's your ultimate goal.
Right. And there's also the idea of sometimes you have to choose between moving down that main path or getting supplies. And it's like, well, do I want to just try to sprint towards the end? Like, especially once you're kind of almost, to the final goal. I don't know. It's just nice, interesting choices.
Yeah, it is. And that's true of the evening hike, too. I mean, the morning hike, you rearrange cards according to their number. In the evening hike, you're still doing a mix of putting cards down from your hand and drawing from a deck. But when you put them down, you know they're not going to move like in the order that you put them down. They're either going to go down at the front of the path or the end of the path. But you don't know, what else is going to be laid out there. I really like that mix of luck and tactics better here than most other places I've seen it, I think. A lot of times game designers like to push the fact that they have, a no luck combat system or something like that. And I get why they do that, because that gives the player more control. But when you remove that random element, you really rob the game of drama. And being able to have both, maintain some agency and keep the drama and excitement in there, is really perfect for a game about going through the woods on an adventure.
In the 1930s.
Yeah, in the 1930s. I mean, it's like classic adventure theme. I really like that about this. Another thing that's interesting, too, about the feeling of adventure that it evokes here is that the base game is at pains to say that all of the hazards in the base game are real-world hazards, which I think is pretty interesting. You're going to deal with real tribes in the Amazon or real ants that could destroy your supplies. When you add in the expansion, that's when they start to add in like mythical elements about the search for the lost city that I think are a pretty cool addition. I mean, it doesn't need those things, but it just adds more fun and adventure to it. So if you pick up the expansion for this is going to come with 5 different modules, and it's a really small box. But I have to say, this might be one of the best expansions for a game I've seen in a while, because it adds a lot of new kinds of play experiences for what's essentially just a small deck of cards. One of the things that it adds that's very important to me is it adds some new companions, which means basically you get a 4th person in your crew. When you're playing the base game, you have 3 different characters, one of each different expertise type that's going on this adventure. When you add this new module, you just get a new person in your crew, and they give you another ability or more health, different things that you can spend to help you last longer, basically, on the adventure. And that was the only way I was able to win the game.
Yeah, it made a huge difference.
And it's not like it takes away the fun, in my mind. It makes it feel winnable to me.
Yeah, because it could still go terribly wrong. And I feel like it's one of those things you could even add in, and sure, it makes it easy in one aspect, but then you could also just give all of your explorers less health if you want to try to offset the benefit of having another person with the added flexibility.
Yeah, I agree with that. And having that flexibility is really key here for adjusting the difficulty to exactly what you feel like maybe you need it to be. Another benefit to this module is that it gives you a dog, and that's just better.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It is better.
Mm-hmm.
Also, though, in addition to having a module that makes the game easier, there is the Undead Conquistador module, which is called the Fountain, where the explorers who have gone before you went searching for the Fountain of Youth, and those undead folks are now wandering the Amazon forest, maybe coming after you.
Right, because they found the Fountain of Eternal Life, not of youth.
Yes, yeah, I like that little note in the rule
yeah.
book. Yeah, it's pretty neat, actually. It says that it makes the game a little bit harder to include those. I don't think that it really does, but I mean, having more cards that do almost exclusively bad things to you is going to make the game a little bit harder, I suppose.
Right.
But it just gives you another little knob to turn to tweak the difficulty for how you like. So that's nice. And it varies up the enemies that you'll see in the game. So those 2 modules are pretty cool, but not that exciting. Just different ways to balance it out for how you like. The others, I think, are more interesting. So you had a chance to play the Mountain.
Yes. And I really like the Mountain a lot because it adds variability to the actual path you're taking to the Lost City. And so you don't know exactly what order they're going to come out in because you put them all face down. And it also adds the new ability to scout cards potentially from the top of the deck. So that allows you to look at the top 3 cards, and that gives you a little bit of foreknowledge of what's happening, and also the ability to discard those cards with, I think, the idea of you're taking a different path. And so that's really nice. And then once you get to the middle, which is where the peak is, then you get to reveal the second half of these cards on the way to the Lost City. And so that way you kind of know what's coming, whether or not it is more food or bullets, having to pay food, having to add an extra obstacle card, things like that.
Which is really neat. That's a nice thematic touch that you can't see what's coming until you get to the peak, and then you can. And adds an interesting gameplay element as well.
I don't think I would play it again without it, honestly.
I like that. Yeah. So it's just more variability that it adds there. Plus the module that I played that you didn't have a chance to play, which is the Werebeast, which is rad. That's the best way to describe it. So it adds these cards into the obstacle deck that can mark you as having like received the spirit of the Werebeast or the mark of the Werebeast or whatever. And the first time that happens, you take this Werebeast card, which looks like, I guess, like the panther version of a Wolfman.
Right.
Yeah, and you just slide it under one of your explorers. So you know that the Werebeast mark is lurking within that person. And then the second time you see one of those marks, then your explorer actually transforms into the Werebeast, which sounds like it's a bad thing, but actually can be good for you depending on the timing of it. So yes, it's a monster, but it's a monster that helps you. And instead of having expertise in like camping or navigation or whatever that explorer's base expertise is in, it has expertise in bullets. So, which I think is just great. It just means it's good at killing stuff. And so what's really interesting about this mechanically is that when your character transforms into the Werebeast, you suddenly refill that character's health. Like it's replaced with the Werebeast. And so if you deplete one of your explorer's health all the way down to 1 and then let it transform, it's essentially like gaining 3 more health for free. It's really cool. I like that a lot. Mechanically, it's interesting. Thematically, it's really fun that like on my third adventure, we were traveling toward the Lost City and things were going really poorly. Our native guide died because one of the white people sacrificed him so that they could move a little bit further down the path, which is sad and why colonization was not a good thing. But the party hurt with him being gone. And the others, like Teddy Roosevelt, is in the crew, and he's not looking good anymore. Suddenly, one of our crew members transforms into the Werebeast, and that's what allows us to continue the rest of the way to the city. That's a cool, dramatic way to end the story. So that module is easily my favorite. I hadn't had a chance to play the mountain, but I just thought that was really neat and added a very different feeling and flavor and new things to think about from the base game.
Yeah, it's one of those modules that I could see having in most of my games. I don't know if I would always put it in, but it's just another little interesting choice or layer or thing to manage that is nice that you can use to help get you to the city.
Yeah, I think that's really cool and just a fun spin on the idea of the base game. And so, yeah, 4 different modules. I think I said 5 originally, but there are 4. And they all add something, with the exception of maybe the fountain, which adds the conquistadors, adds something that I felt like was maybe missing from the base game for me. The conquistadors are cool. I like that thematically, but I don't feel like they needed to be there necessarily.
Yeah, they don't really, I feel like, introduce anything new other than just bad cards.
Yeah, which is okay. I mean, having some variability in what you're going to encounter is never a bad thing.
Right.
It's very easy just to mix all this in if you wanted to, or it would be easy to just deal with it in a modular sense and say, okay, this time I want to play with the Werebeast, this time I don't. And the rules overhead for each of these is very small. Like just a couple of paragraphs, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, very cool expansion. I would definitely say, like, unequivocally, if you like this game, the base game, you need that expansion. For me, it adds just a lot of fun and variability that just is going to make your experience more enjoyable. And for me, it's the only way that I would win the game. So,
yeah, I'm not even sure I would enjoy this game that much without the added things.
Yeah.
From the expansion.
I enjoyed the base game quite a bit. It would definitely wear thin for me pretty quickly without the expansion.
You see, maybe that's it, because I played several games in a row, and they all ended very badly. And so I think things were already kind of starting to wear thin with just that. And just having a little bit more variability and, like, I guess a sense of agency and, like, interesting choices, yeah, that helped.
To me, the agency is the most important thing. Even though, yes, there's a module in here that gives you another companion, and that just straight makes the game easier. The mountain and the mark, which is the official name for the Werebeast module, those both give you more decisions to make and like timing decisions that are important. And that's what makes it fun for me, I think. So excellent expansion. So if you've already got the base game, definitely pick that up. Highly recommend it. One thing that I did wrestle with a little bit as I was playing the game is whether it's fair to say that this is a thematic game or not. My first impression of this was I'm looking at a row of cards, and my main decisions are, do I want to swap this card with that card so that I can remove that card from the end? And it just seems like sort of a pile of mechanics. Not a ton of mechanics, but just very obviously to me an abstract game that somebody put an adventure theme on. That was my initial impression.
I don't know if that was my initial impression per se, just because the art, I think, grabbed me. I think it is largely an abstract game. And the more I played it and kind of realized how I wasn't paying attention to the description of the card at all most of the time. It was like, okay, this does what? Okay, now I'm looking at this. And so, yeah, I would say for me, the art really sold the theme, and that made it have a theme and kept it from just being dry. But it still seems like an abstract game.
It's not that it totally feels disconnected to the theme. I mean, when you encounter a crocodile, you can spend a bullet to get a food, right? Which you can play that scenario out in your head pretty easily, I think.
Right.
And that makes sense, I guess. But having a thing make sense thematically and it being a thematic game where all the mechanics are grounded in the theme that you're talking about are two different things. And in my mind then, at the beginning, I thought it was maybe abstract. The more I played it, the more I agree about the artwork. The artwork is so compelling in this game, partly because it's just beautiful, but partly because it's like it lends the entire game theme by producing an atmosphere there that sort of sucks you in a way that thematically grounded mechanics don't necessarily.
Right.
I don't know how else to say that. I've never seen a game where the art drives the theme as much as this does.
Right. If it was mediocre art, I feel like it would just feel like an abstract game to me.
Yeah, agreed. That's a good way to say it. And I originally thought that it was quite abstract when I saw that this has been re-implemented in the language of Board Game Geek, reskinned in everybody else's language. So as a Judge Dredd game, that's a bizarre transformation. And I thought, how thematic can this be if they can transform it from 1930s adventure to Judge Dredd? And if you look at the materials, I haven't played the Judge Dredd game, so there might be more changes than this. But like the ammunition logo has changed, the move forward on the path logo has changed, but otherwise it looks very similar.
Yeah.
Like almost identical in terms of graphic design. And so I just assumed then that maybe there was more of a disconnect there. But I ended up thinking that the art is so evocative and funny at times. Like just the expressions on people's faces and the vibrancy of it. That, I don't know, it just lends the game a sense of joy and adventure that I didn't expect just from the artist. So Garen Ewing, I think is the name of the artist here, if that's how you pronounce it. He's just done a tremendous service to this game. And I mean, I think Pierre Sylvester, the designer, has done good work here. It's a solid game. It's a solid game. I don't want to say that it isn't, but the art is what elevates it for sure. And so all of that, plus the replayability of the game and what comes with the modules and the expansion and just in the order that the cards come out. I mean, I would say this is a fairly replayable game, even just with the base game, but definitely more so with the expansion.
I think the game has a lot of replayability. I think for me personally, the more I played it, the less I would want to get it out. I don't know if it has quite the same replayability for me. I feel like for a lot of solo players, this style of game has a lot more replayability and people will easily come back to it. For me, I think it would start to fade with time. Yeah,
I agree with that. And that pretty much covers the basics for the game and for the expansion. And so we're going to do like we always do and end this review by talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. And I just want to be clear. I think there is a lot of good in this game. In case you heard those last few comments in a way that maybe makes you think we didn't like it, I did like this game.
I thought it was a good game. I enjoyed playing it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. And part of that, as we've already said, is the artwork is fantastic. It's a beautifully illustrated, colorful world that's evocative and really sucks you in because of the artwork. I really like that a lot. I love the fact that they used look-alike models for the illustrations. I really like that they modeled a lot of the illustrations on real-world characters, like Teddy Roosevelt, I mentioned before, but also other explorers that I'd not heard of before. They actually have notes at the end of the rulebook about that and about how you can go on and learn more about them. That's a nice touch, I thought. And a theme that feels not unique, but it feels like a fresh take on a theme that has been done before. Maybe.
Yeah, I would agree.
I like that. The setup time is very quick. The play time is quick. My first game was about 30 minutes. I think you said yours was 30 to 45.
Yeah, it was definitely on the longer side, but I think I get into games a little bit slower than you for my first playthrough.
But after that first playthrough, once things are clicking, I mean, it really hums along.
Right.
After my first game, my games were taking 15 to 20 minutes, which is really nice. A really quick game, especially considering the amount of decision making there is here.
Mm-hmm.
So I really like that, and it has an easy rule set. So even if you play it for a little bit, put it away, pick it up again, it's not like you have to thumb through a 30-page rule book to remember what's going on. It's quick, easy rule set, not complex, and yet still has a myriad of decisions to be made. And maybe one of the best things for me is that mix of the excitement that comes with the luck and the tactical decisions. Really like that a lot. The feeling that gives you is a really nice balance.
Yeah, I think so too.
And one other thing that I'm going to add to the list is I love the Werebeast module. Yeah, I just think it's cool. I mean, I really love the expansion overall, but the Werebeast module in particular, I really, really like. So there are a lot of things that we really like about the game. There are a few things that I would consider bad about this game. One of them is the solo structure for the rule book, as far as putting the rules in 3 different places. I don't like that at all, especially because setting up the hikes for the morning and the evening took a while to get in my head, like how you set it up and what order you put cards down from your hand versus from the deck. So I felt like I was thumbing back and forth through the rules for my first couple of games a bit, and not remembering which section that's in is frustrating to me. So I didn't like that rules arrangement. Also, for as much as I like the luck in here and the drama that it creates, the game can feel unfair sometimes.
Yeah, it can be real swingy.
Yeah.
You can have those games that just crash and burn right out the gate.
Yeah, and that does not feel good.
No.
And there's not much you can do about it either. I mean, if you don't get the right cards into your hand, it doesn't matter how much planning you have, you're just messed over. I don't think that happens that often. I think most of the time you could puzzle your way through it if you really wanted to drill down. But the luck is a significant factor. And for me, one other bad thing I'm going to add here is I think the base game by itself feels too difficult because of that luck element. I like a hard co-op game, but I like a hard co-op game that feels fair. I think the fairness comes in the expansion.
Yes, I agree with that.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing because it is mitigated by getting the expansion, but it does mean an additional purchase as well. So there is that. As for things that are ugly about the game, though, I don't really have any. This is a solid game.
Yeah, I don't have any either.
I really like it. I really enjoyed my time with it. I wouldn't say that I love it. It's not going to be one of my favorite games or something that I just want to revisit over and over again or anything like that. But I think it's a really enjoyable game and one that I had fun with.
Yeah, it's not a game that I love.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing. I just tend to keep a very lean collection personally, and I want it to be filled with games that I only just love. Most people don't feel that way. And so I think in some ways this game feels like a modern classic solo game. And what I mean by that is I got a similar feeling to playing this as when I played games like Onirim, which I mentioned earlier, or Friday. This is a game that feels like it's been around longer than it has, but not in the sense that it feels dated, but just in a sense that it feels timeless, I guess.
Right.
I'm sure part of that is the artwork, but it's just a very well-designed game, and it's very easy to see why it gets so much love from the solo community, I think. I mean, it's been out for a couple of years now, and I still see people playing it pretty regularly. That's a good sign, given how fast the pace of the board game world moves nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, not a game that's going to get the stamp of approval from us because we reserve that for games that we really love and that both of us really love. But it is a game we like and a game that we recommend and a game that I think you'll have a lot of fun playing, especially if you end up picking up the expansion. And so that's all we've got for this review. I do want to mention a couple of things to you before we go. If you like the podcast, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram to see more about what we're playing and what new games have come in for us to review, and follow us that way. Keep up with the latest news and sometimes giveaways for the show. Speaking of giveaways, we're running a giveaway right now that you can find out more about on our Facebook page or Instagram. Go there and enter to win a copy of The Lost Expedition and the expansion. We're going to be giving away our review copy to one of you, so check that out. And if you haven't already, go onto iTunes and give our show a rating or review. That sounds like a small thing, but we're a small podcast, and this really helps more people to find out about the show and to learn more about the solo games that we care so much about. And that's all we've got for you this episode. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.